There's something about old bridges that makes them feel haunted, like they've witnessed too much over the years. But none of the bridges I've seen could compare to the Red Bridge of Ghosts. It was late one night when I first heard about it. I was at a small bar on the outskirts of town having a drink after a long day of work. A few locals were sitting nearby, swapping stories, as people often do in places like that. Most of it was harmless small talk, about the weather, fishing spots, the usual. But then one of the older men, a grizzled local who had been staring into his glass for most of the evening, suddenly spoke up. "You ever hear of the Red Bridge?" he asked, his voice low and gravelly. I hadn't, but something in his tone caught my attention. It wasn't a question. It was more like a statement, as though I should already know the answer. Everyone else at the table went quiet, and I could tell they were all waiting for him to continue. He leaned in, lowering his voice even further as if he were sharing some terrible secret. "It's not far from here," he said. "The Red Bridge. It's been there for years, but not many people talk about it. No one goes near it anymore." I was curious, of course, but at that point I wasn't sure if it was just another ghost story. "What's so special about it?" I asked. The man looked over at me, his eyes narrowing. "It's not just special, it's cursed," he said. "That bridge has seen a lot of death. People disappear on it, and they say it's because of the ghosts." The other patrons shifted uncomfortably, and the man fell silent, sipping his drink like he was done with the conversation. But I wasn't. "What do you mean? What ghosts?" He looked me dead in the eyes, and for a moment I felt a cold chill run down my spine. "The bridge is a burial ground," he muttered. "A place for the dead. They say it's where the souls of the lost gather, waiting to drag the living into the water." The silence that followed was thick, and the mood in the room shifted. I wasn't sure if it was the alcohol talking or if they all believed it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something about the Red Bridge was true. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I had to see it for myself. The next day, I found the road leading to the bridge. It wasn't marked on any map, just an old dirt path that veered off the main road. I drove for what felt like hours, the trees closing in around me, the air growing cooler as I got farther from town. Eventually, I reached it. The Red Bridge was exactly as described, its iron frame coated in layers of rust, the red paint long faded, now more of a deep, dark crimson that seemed to soak into the wood like blood. It was perched over a small creek that ran through the woods, its waters dark and still. The bridge creaked in the wind as if it were barely holding itself together. But the most unsettling part was the feeling that settled over me the moment I stepped onto it. I didn't see anything at first. No ghosts, no figures, just the stillness of the forest and the faint sound of water below. But as I walked further, across the bridge, something changed. The air grew colder, the fog from the creek rising up in thick tendrils that seemed to reach for me. And that's when I heard it. A whisper, soft at first, almost like the wind, but then louder, clearer. It was a voice faint and distant calling out to me. "Help me." I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I tried to shake it off. It was just my mind playing tricks, right? But the voice came again, closer this time. "Help me." I looked around, my eyes scanning the mist around me, but there was nothing. No one. The whisper was coming from beneath the bridge, from the dark water below. I stepped closer to the edge, peering down into the creek, and that's when I saw them. Faces, pale, distorted, and staring up at me from the water. Their eyes were wide, vacant, and their mouths moved silently, as if they were trying to scream. I stumbled back, feeling the coldness sink into my bones. The air seemed to press in, around me, the mist growing thicker, and the whispers growing louder, more frantic. "Help me," they cried. "Please, help us." Suddenly I felt it, something pulling at me, a force from the water below, as if the bridge itself were trying to drag me under. I could feel hands, cold and clammy, brushing against my legs like they were reaching up from the dark water. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The pull was too strong. Panicking, I turned to run, but the bridge felt endless. It stretched on forever, the fog swirling around me, making it impossible to see where I was going. The whispers grew louder, the cries growing more desperate, and I realized I wasn't alone anymore. The figures were there, shadows moving around me, closing in from every direction. They were there just beyond my sight, their eyes locked on me. With all the strength I had, I forced myself to move, sprinting toward the end of the bridge. It felt like I wasn't getting any closer, like the bridge was stretching further away. With every step, finally I burst through the mist, my feet hitting solid ground. I didn't look back. I ran as fast as I could, not stopping until I reached the car. When I got in, I locked the doors and drove away without a second glance. To this day, I haven't returned to that bridge. The memory of those faces in the water, the whispers that seem to come from nowhere, it still haunts me. I've tried to forget, but sometimes when I'm alone in the dark, I still hear them. The voices, calling. If you ever find yourself near a bridge painted red and surrounded by mist, do yourself a favor. Keep driving. Don't stop, because once you cross, the bridge doesn't let you leave so easily. The ghosts are always waiting. Love the story? Show us with a like, hit that subscribe button, and share your scariest idea in the comments. And don't forget to tell us the time and where you're listening from. We want to know where the fear is spreading. I had always been fascinated by old places. Ancient structures, forgotten roads, hidden corners of the world. So when I heard about the stone bridge, an ancient bridge said to be tied to a curse and a riddle no one had ever solved, I couldn't resist. I had to see it for myself. It was one of those summer afternoons when the heat hung thick in the air and the trees seemed to sway lazily in the wind. A friend of mine, someone who had lived in the area for years, had mentioned it in passing over a cup of coffee. "You'll never find the stone bridge," he said, half joking. "And if you do, it's a place you should leave alone." Naturally, that piqued my curiosity. I asked him more, but he clammed up, repeating only one thing. "There's a riddle tied to that bridge. No one has ever solved it and lived to tell the tale." I didn't think much of it at the time, dismissing it as an old folk tale, a story meant to scare children. But after a few weeks of researching, I found the bridge. It was out in the countryside, far from any main road, a place hidden by dense woods and overgrown paths. The hike to the stone bridge was long and tiring. I had to maneuver through the brush, pushing aside thick undergrowth and twisting branches. But when I reached it, I could see why people whispered about it. The bridge was massive, built from rough gray stone that looked like it had been placed there centuries ago. It spanned over a deep ravine, the dark water flowing slowly below. It was beautifully weathered, but at the same time, there was something foreboding about it. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't supposed to be there. There was an oppressive silence surrounding the place, a kind of stillness that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. As I stepped onto the bridge, I felt a strange pressure in the air, like I was crossing into a place that was never meant to be found. But I continued, drawn by the riddle I'd read about. The legend said that a riddle was carved into the stone, at the very center of the bridge, and that anyone who could solve it would be granted something: immortality, eternal wisdom, or something else, depending on who you asked. But if you failed, you'd vanish, lost to the ravine below, or swallowed by the darkness of the forest. The center of the bridge had a large stone slab worn by time but still legible. The riddle was carved into it, and it read, "I am not alive, but I grow. I do not have lungs, but I need air. I do not have a mouth, yet I can drown. What am I?" I stared at the riddle, unsure of how to approach it. The air around me grew colder. Despite the summer heat, and the silence felt oppressive. I wasn't alone, I knew that. There was something else here, something watching. I read the riddle over and over, the words sinking in, but I couldn't come up with an answer. My thoughts began to race, and I could almost feel the weight of the riddle bearing down on me, pushing me to find the answer. I ran through the possibilities, something alive but not alive, needing air, yet capable of drowning. It was then that I realized the answer was right in front of me. I whispered it aloud. Fire. As soon as the word left my lips, a strange wind kicked up, swirling around the bridge, and the ground beneath me shifted. I heard something crack, like stone grinding against stone. The air turned thick and the sky above seemed to darken as if the world itself was holding its breath. Then a voice, deep, ancient, and filled with sadness, spoke from the shadows. A voice that seemed to come from every corner of the bridge. Wrong. I froze. I hadn't expected that. I hadn't thought about the consequences of getting it wrong, or what would happen if the riddle went unsolved. The air grew heavier, and the shadows around the bridge began to deepen, stretching out toward me like dark hands reaching from the ravine. I looked back over my shoulder, but the path I had come from had vanished. The woods were gone, replaced by an unending void. The riddle had done something to the bridge, something I couldn't quite explain, and now I was trapped. The voice spoke, again, and this time it was clearer, closer. You solved the first part of the riddle, but the answer must be true in all things. Fire does not drown. But you will. Before I could react, the ground beneath me trembled, and I stumbled backward. The ravine below the bridge seemed to swallow the air around me. The voice echoed, becoming more frantic, almost like a warning, but I couldn't understand it. I was pulled forward toward the edge of the bridge and I tried to break free. But the shadows enveloped me, and then everything went dark. I don't know how long I was unconscious, but when I woke up, I was no longer on the bridge. The stone had disappeared and I was lying in the forest, the sun shining through the trees. The riddle, the bridge, and the voice, they were all gone as though they had never existed. But I knew something had changed. I hadn't solved the riddle, and I hadn't died. But I felt different. The quiet felt louder now, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the forest was alive with eyes watching me. As I stood up, I heard a soft voice, barely a whisper, trailing in the wind behind me. One day you'll return, and then you'll answer. I left the forest that day, but the memory of the riddle still haunts me. And now every time I close my eyes, I wonder if I'll ever be able to solve it. If you ever find the stone bridge, don't even think about the riddle. It's not just a puzzle, it's a trap. And once you step onto the bridge, you may never be able to leave. Because the riddle doesn't just ask for an answer, it demands something far worse. And the bridge, it always gets what it wants. There are moments in life where you can feel something off, but you can't quite explain why. That was how I felt the night I stumbled upon the misty crossing. If I had known then what I know now, I would have kept walking no matter how much. The curiosity gnawed at me. It all began when I decided to take a solo camping trip. Nothing too ambitious, just a night out in the woods to clear my head. I was tired, stressed out from work, and needed some peace and quiet. The hike through. The forest was serene at first, with the sun filtering through the canopy of trees, casting long shadows on the forest floor. But as the sun dipped lower, I found myself veering off the main trail, distracted by the silence that was almost too perfect. I hadn't noticed at first, but the deeper I wandered, the thicker the fog seemed to get. It wasn't the typical morning mist that would burn off by midday. It was dense, cloying, and made it hard to see much further than a few feet in front of me. I stopped walking, momentarily unsure of where I was. The trail had disappeared behind me, swallowed by the fog, but then through the thick haze I saw it. A narrow bridge crossing over a creek, its wooden beams old but sturdy, standing out in the fog like something out of a forgotten dream. Something about it intrigued me, though I couldn't put my finger on why. I was a few miles away from my campsite, but the bridge seemed to call to me, almost beckoning me to cross. The moment I set foot on the bridge, the temperature seemed to drop, as if the air itself was trying to keep me away. The fog swirled around my feet, creeping up like a living thing, curling around my legs. I paused, glancing back over my shoulder at the path I had taken, but everything was gone. The forest, the trail, the world I knew, it was all swallowed by the fog, leaving me with nothing but the bridge. I told myself it was just a part of the hike, that the fog had rolled in thicker than usual, but something didn't sit right with me. The stillness in the air was unnatural, as if the world had forgotten to breathe. The creek beneath the bridge flowed silently, the water dark and murky, too quiet. I took a few more steps onto the bridge. That's when I heard it. A soft whispering sound. At first I thought it was the wind, but it didn't have the usual rustling quality. It was almost like a voice, low and faint, as though someone was speaking just out of reach. The sound sent a shiver down my spine, and I instinctively looked around, but there was nothing. Just the fog and the creek, the mist crawling over the wooden planks of the bridge. Then came the footsteps. Slow, deliberate, like someone walking behind me. But when I turned around, there was no one there. The bridge was empty, save for the fog swirling and twisting around my feet. But the footsteps continued echoing around me, as if someone was walking right behind me, following my every move. I spun around again, heart racing, but still nothing. The sensation of being watched grew stronger, and the more I tried to shake it off, the heavier the air became, pressing in from all sides. I couldn't breathe. "Who's there?" I called, my voice sounding much weaker than I'd hoped. The mist thickened in response, and the sound of the footsteps grew louder, closer, like something or someone was gaining on me. That's when I saw it. In the fog ahead, I could make out a shape, dark, indistinct, moving across the bridge. I couldn't see the figure clearly, but the outline was unmistakable. It was tall, thin, and moving slowly toward me, its form barely visible, but still. There. I took a step back, instinct telling me to turn and run, but my feet wouldn't move. The fog wrapped around me tighter, and the temperature dropped even further. I could see my breath now, each exhale forming clouds in the frozen air. The figure stopped about 10 feet away, standing still in the mist, like it was waiting for something. I couldn't make out its features, but I felt its eyes on me, cold, unblinking. And then I heard it. A voice, barely a whisper, coming from the shape. "Don't cross." It wasn't just the words that chilled me. It was the tone, like the voice was warning me, like it knew something I didn't. And suddenly I felt like I was in danger. This wasn't just some lost traveler. This wasn't a normal figure. This was something old, something tied to the mist, to the bridge. I didn't wait for it to move any closer. I turned and ran, my feet pounding on the wooden planks of the bridge, but it felt like I was running forever, as if the bridge stretched on endlessly. The fog thickened, and I couldn't see beyond the mist. I couldn't see anything but the shadows closing in on me, the sound of footsteps following just behind. I reached the edge of the bridge, my breath ragged, my heart racing. I didn't stop running until I was far away, back in the thicker trees, away from the bridge, the fog, and whatever had been standing there. It wasn't until later, when I sat down to catch my breath, that I realized something. The entire time I was on that bridge, I hadn't heard a single sound from the creek below. No water, no birds, no animals, nothing. Just the eerie silence and those footsteps, and the whispers that still echoed in my ears. To this day, I haven't gone back to that part of the woods. I don't care if the fog rolls in thick or if I'm ever in the area again. The misty crossing isn't just a bridge, it's a crossing point to something else, something that waits for those who dare to walk across. If you ever find yourself near a bridge shrouded in fog, where the world around you seems to disappear into nothing, don't cross it. Don't listen to the whispers or the footsteps, because once you do, you may never be able to escape the mist. And the thing in the fog, it will follow you always. They say some places are cursed. I never believed in that kind of thing until I crossed the Dead Man's Bridge. It started innocently enough. I was just driving through a small town, trying to find my way to a hiking trail I'd read about online. The road was winding, narrow, and overgrown in places, and I thought I'd gotten lost for a moment. Then I saw the sign, Dead Man's Bridge, 1 mile ahead, and I shrugged it off, thinking it was just another quirky name for a local landmark. I had no idea what I was about to walk into. The road to the bridge was deserted, with nothing but dense trees and rolling hills for miles. When I arrived at the bridge, I pulled over and parked, curious but cautious. The name was unsettling, sure, but I didn't believe in ghost stories or old myths. It looked like a typical old stone bridge, solid, weathered by years of use, but still standing strong. There were no other cars in sight, and the air around me was eerily quiet. I took a deep breath, stepped out of the car, and made my way toward the bridge. As I crossed the road, I noticed something strange. There was a faint smell in the air, something metallic, like old iron mixed with wet earth. I brushed it off as the scent of rain or mud, but the moment I stepped onto the bridge, the atmosphere shifted. It was subtle at first, a slight drop in temperature, a sudden stillness, but it was enough to make me pause. I didn't feel alone. I looked down at the water beneath me. The creek was narrow and sluggish, its surface rippling lazily as if the water itself was reluctant to move. But then the temperature dropped even further, and I noticed something odd. There was a faint reflection in the water, a figure standing on the bridge behind me. I whipped around, heart racing, but there was no one there. The bridge was empty, just the old stone and the heavy silence. I turned back to the water, but the reflection was still there. Only now it wasn't just a shadow of a person. It was a man. I blinked, and the figure was gone. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine, but I told myself it was nothing. A trick of the light, the water's reflection, playing games with my mind. I continued across the bridge, trying to shake off the feeling of unease that had settled over me. But the further I walked, the more I started to feel watched. It wasn't like someone was following me, at least I didn't think so. But the hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and my steps grew hesitant. That's when I heard it. A voice, low and raspy but unmistakable, rising from the silence. "Help me." I froze. It was soft, barely audible, but it was there. A voice, old, broken, like it had been waiting for years to be heard. "Please." The voice came again, this time clearer. I can't move on. I didn't want to look, didn't want to acknowledge it. But the pull was irresistible. I turned my head slightly to the side, my eyes scanning the empty space. And that's when I saw him again, just at the edge of my vision, standing against the stone railing of the bridge. The man was tall, dressed in old-fashioned clothes, his face pale and gaunt, his eyes wide with a hollow, unblinking stare. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. Instead, the air seemed to vibrate with the sorrow of his voice. I couldn't move. My feet were rooted to the spot as the figure slowly inched closer, its presence heavy in the air. The temperature dropped even more, and I could see my breath in the cold. It felt like time had slowed, the moment stretching on forever. "Please," the figure whispered again. "Help me cross." A cold, sharp wind gusted across the bridge, and the figure seemed to waver, like he wasn't fully part of this world, like he was slipping between the realms of the living and the dead. But his gaze never left me, and that's when I understood. He wasn't asking for help. He was demanding it. Something about him, about the bridge, made me feel like I had no choice, like crossing the bridge was somehow tied to me. The voice became more insistent. "Help me or stay with me, forever." Suddenly, I felt a sharp pressure on my chest as though something was pulling me toward the center of the bridge. I could barely breathe, the weight of it overwhelming. The shadows around me seemed to grow longer, the air thick with the whispers of 1,000 souls, all trapped between the living and the dead. Without thinking, I stumbled backward, away from the figure. My heart was hammering in my chest, and my mind raced with panic. I turned and ran back toward the road, my feet stumbling over the stones as I tried to escape the pull of the bridge. I didn't stop until I was back in my car, locked inside with the engine running. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Nothing. The bridge was just a faint silhouette in the distance, shrouded by fog, but I knew it was still there, waiting. I didn't look back. I don't know what happened that night, what the figure truly wanted. Maybe he was a lost soul, trapped between worlds, or maybe something darker was at play. But the one thing I know for sure is that the Dead Man's Bridge isn't just a place. It's a threshold, a crossing point for something far beyond the physical world. And if you ever find yourself standing on it, I beg you, don't look for the figure. Don't listen to the whispers, and don't cross to the other side. Because once you do, you might find yourself trapped there forever, bound by the curse of the bridge with no way to escape. The dead man's bridge doesn't let go. It doesn't forget. And once it has you, you may never leave. There are places that seem ordinary until you find yourself there, standing at the edge of something you can't explain. The Forgotten Trail and the Black Bridge were one of those places. I didn't mean to find it, but once I did, I don't think I'll ever forget it. It started innocently enough. My friends and I were always up for an adventure, and we'd heard about a hiking trail that no one seemed to talk about. It wasn't on any official map, and most of the locals avoided it. But we were the kind of people who loved a good challenge. It sounded like the perfect place to spend the weekend. We made our way up the trail, excited for what lay ahead. The trees loomed overhead, blocking out the sun and casting everything in a gloomy shade. The air was thick with the scent of moss and wet earth. Nothing about it felt wrong, at least not at first. It was just an overgrown trail, old and abandoned, that wound through the woods and eventually led to a bridge. The deeper we went into the forest, the more isolated we felt. No birds, no animals, just the soft crunch of leaves underfoot and the occasional rustling of branches in the wind. After what felt like hours, we stumbled upon it, the Black Bridge. It wasn't much of a bridge at first glance. It looked old, ancient even, with blackened wood that seemed to have been scorched by time or something else. The bridge itself was narrow, barely wide enough for one person, and the ropes that supported it were frayed and frizzling, as though they couldn't hold anything heavier than a whisper. But that wasn't what made it unsettling. What made it unsettling was the silence. The complete and utter silence. The bridge was positioned over a stream, but we couldn't hear the water. It was like everything had gone still, like the world itself had stopped moving. I stepped onto the bridge, and that's when I noticed the first oddity. The air felt heavier, colder. At that moment, I realized the others had fallen silent too. We weren't speaking, none of us. We were all standing still, looking at the bridge, but no one was really seeing it. It felt like we were waiting for something, like the place itself was watching us. One of my friends, Rachel, was the first to move. She stepped forward, walking across the bridge with her usual confidence. But as she reached the middle, something strange happened. She stopped, not because she wanted to, but because she couldn't move. "Rachel," I called, but she didn't answer. I stepped forward, and that's when I saw it. A shadow. A long, dark shape slithering along the ground, just under the bridge. It moved like liquid, stretching across the rocks below, growing in size until it was too large to ignore. "Rachel!" I shouted again, now panicked, trying to pull her back. But she wouldn't move. Her eyes were wide, staring straight ahead, unblinking, almost as though she wasn't there at all. The rest of us rushed forward, but as soon as we got close, we felt it. The same strange pressure in the air, like a weight was settling on our chests. The shadows beneath the bridge began to twist and coil, and that's when I saw it. Dark, half-formed shapes, creeping out of the blackness, stretching toward us. We grabbed Rachel and yanked her away from the bridge. She didn't fight, but she didn't seem to recognize us either. Her eyes were vacant, distant. We didn't look back as we ran. By the time we reached the trailhead, Rachel was herself again. At least, that's what she seemed to be. She didn't remember anything about what happened after she stepped onto the bridge. She said she felt a strange tug, like something had been pulling at her, but she couldn't explain it. We didn't stick around to find out more. We left, and none of us ever talked about going back. The Forgotten Trail was forgotten again, just like that. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still out there, waiting. The Black Bridge wasn't just a bridge. It was something more, something old, tied to that piece of land in ways we couldn't understand. I tried to look it up afterward to see if anyone else had experienced anything strange on that trail, but no one talked about it. The trail didn't even show up on most maps anymore, as if it had been erased from existence. That's what scares me most. It's like the trail doesn't want to be found. And the bridge, it doesn't want anyone crossing it. Now, whenever I pass through those woods, I can't help but think about it. What was on that bridge? What was watching us, waiting for us to cross? And where did Rachel go when she stood there, lost in that moment, staring out into nothing? I don't know. But I do know one thing. If you ever find yourself walking the forgotten trail, don't go looking for the Black Bridge. Some places are better left undiscovered because once you cross it, you might never return. And if you do, you might not be the same. There's a bridge in the heart of a forgotten forest, a place so isolated that it barely appears on maps, let alone in the minds of most people. But I know it well now. I've crossed the broken bridge of echoes, and I'll never forget what happened when I did. It started innocently enough. A weekend getaway with a group of friends looking for something adventurous, something to break the routine. One of us had heard about an old trail in the woods, a trail that led to an abandoned bridge, long forgotten by most people. The more they talked about it, the more intrigued I became. I wasn't a believer in ghost stories, but I figured, why not? It'd be an interesting detour. The hike wasn't long, but the forest around us was dense, the trees stretching high into the sky, blocking out most of the sunlight. It felt like we had stepped into a place that wasn't meant to be found. The air was still, and there was a strange heaviness to it, like we were walking through a veil. Finally, we found it. The bridge wasn't much to look at, old stone, cracked, and crumbling in places with iron railings barely holding together. The creek beneath it was narrow but deep, the water running dark and quiet, as though it had forgotten how to make noise. The bridge looked like it had been abandoned for centuries, forgotten by everyone but those who were foolish enough to seek it out. We stood there for a while, looking at the bridge, trying to decide if we should cross. There was something unsettling about it, something that made my skin crawl. But we were young and fearless, or maybe just too curious, and eventually, we all decided to walk across. It wasn't until I set foot on the bridge that I felt it. A strange sensation, like I was being watched. I glanced over at my friends, but they were already moving ahead, seemingly oblivious. I tried to shake off the feeling, but it stuck with me. The first few steps were uneventful. The air was damp, and the wood beneath my feet creaked with every step. But that was to be expected. It was old, after all. But as I walked further onto the bridge, I noticed something odd. The air seemed to grow colder, and a strange buzzing sound filled my ears. Almost like a low hum. It was faint at first, but it grew louder with every step I took. I paused. Something wasn't right. When I looked down into the creek below, I saw them. Figures. They weren't visible at first, but as I stared longer, I could make them out. Rising from the water, their faces blurred, their mouths moving soundlessly. My heart skipped a beat. I quickly looked away, but the buzzing sound grew louder, and that's when I realized what was happening. The bridge was echoing. The sound of my footsteps wasn't just mine. It wasn't even just the sound of the bridge creaking. There were voices. Soft at first, like whispers carried by the wind, but then as I moved further, the echoes became clearer. It was like the bridge was repeating everything that had happened there before. "Help me," a voice whispered from somewhere. Deep beneath the bridge, I stopped cold. I didn't want to look back, but the pull was too strong. I turned around, and that's when I saw it, the shadow. A figure standing at the far end of the bridge, just barely visible, like it was half-formed in the air. "Help me." The voice came again, this time clearer, louder. It wasn't just a whisper anymore. It was a scream, desperate, full of pain and sorrow. I felt a chill run down my spine. I wasn't alone. The figure was still there, unmoving, its face obscured by the shadows, but its presence was unmistakable. I turned and ran, but the echo followed me, louder now. The whispers turned to voices, the voices to cries, and the cries to screams. It was as if the bridge itself had become a tomb for lost souls, their voices trapped in the wood, endlessly repeating the final moments of their lives. Every step I took, the echoes grew stronger, the cries more frantic. My friends ahead of me on the bridge didn't seem to hear anything. They just kept walking, chatting casually, unaware of the horror unfolding behind them. I tried to call out to them, but my voice was drowned out by the noise, the screaming, the wailing, the endless cries of those who had crossed this bridge before. The bridge itself seemed to hum with an unnatural energy, as if it were alive, feeding on the terror it caused. Finally, I reached the end of the bridge, but as I stepped off it, the voices didn't stop. They followed me, echoing in my head like a soundtrack to my panic. My breath was shallow, my heart racing, but when I turned to look at the bridge, I saw something that stopped me in my tracks. The figure, it was still there, standing at the far end of the bridge, its form more solid now, its face clearer, though still shrouded in darkness. And as I watched, it reached out toward me, its hand stretching across the bridge, its fingers curling like it was trying to grab me. I stumbled back, my heart pounding in my chest, but the figure didn't move. It just stood there watching me. And then, as suddenly as it had appeared, it was gone, swallowed by the shadows. I don't know how long I stood there, but when I finally turned to leave, the voices stopped. The echo faded, as if the bridge had released its grip on me. I didn't speak to my friends about what had happened. They hadn't heard the voices, and I wasn't sure they would believe me. But I could never forget what I had experienced on the broken Bridge of Echoes. There are stories that tell you about haunted places, about ghosts trapped in time, and the souls of the lost calling out for help. But there's something different about this bridge. The echoes of the past aren't just memories. They're alive, they're trapped, and they want you to join them. If you ever come across a bridge like this, an old, forgotten thing tucked deep in the woods, don't step on it, because once you do, the echoes will follow you, and you'll hear the voices just as I did, and you may never escape them. Some places seem to have a life of their own, hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right time to reveal their true nature. I had no idea what I was walking into when I came across the bridge under the full moon. It started as a casual hike. A friend and I decided to take a weekend trip to the woods, far from the noise and distractions of the city. The plan was simple: take a trail, enjoy the serenity of nature, and forget about everything for a while. But of course, nothing ever goes as planned. We spent the day hiking along a well-worn path, enjoying the scenery and the calm of the forest. But as night began to fall, the temperature dropped, and the shadows grew long. We realized we had taken a wrong turn somewhere. Instead of heading back to the car, we found ourselves in unfamiliar territory, surrounded by thick trees and dense fog. I'm not the kind of person who gets spooked easily, but I had to admit, there was something unsettling about the forest at night. It felt alive, not in the way the day brought life, but in a quiet, predatory way. The air was thick, and the rustling of leaves felt like whispers. That's when we saw it, the bridge. It wasn't on our map, and we certainly hadn't passed it earlier. It was a stone bridge, beautiful and ancient-looking, arching over a narrow creek. The full moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie light over the scene. The stone was covered in moss and ivy, and the water below seemed to shimmer with a strange, unnatural glow. I thought it was odd, but still, it seemed like a way to get out of the woods. We crossed it without thinking twice, making casual jokes about how spooky it all seemed. But as soon as we stepped onto the bridge, the atmosphere shifted. The air grew colder, and the forest around us seemed to hold its breath. "Do you feel that?" my friend asked, his voice suddenly tight with unease. I nodded. "Yeah, it's like the whole place went quiet." We stopped midway across the bridge, both of us trying to make sense of the weird feeling creeping over us. The sound of the creek beneath us seemed muffled, as if the world had become a little quieter, a little farther away. That's when the moonlight changed. At first, it was just a pale silver glow, but suddenly it shifted to a deep, reddish hue, as if the moon itself was bleeding into the night. The bridge seemed to pulse with the change, the stone glowing faintly under the new light. I turned to my friend, but before I could say anything, I heard it. A low, distant howl echoing through the trees. It wasn't the cry of any animal I recognized. It sounded too human. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, my breath catching in my throat. He nodded, his face pale. "We need to get off this bridge." But before we could move, I felt it. A presence. Something was there standing in the shadows, watching us from the far end of the bridge. The figure was tall, its form barely discernible in the dark, but there was no mistaking the eerie feeling it gave off. It was as if it were made of the shadows themselves, and the moment my eyes locked onto it, I couldn't look away. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling despite myself. The figure didn't answer. It didn't move. But I could feel its gaze on us, pressing into my skin, suffocating me with its intensity. And then it spoke. "Cross. And never return." The voice was deep, almost guttural, like something ancient, something that didn't belong in this world. It sent a chill down my spine, and I took an instinctive step back. "What the hell is that?" My friend gasped, his eyes wide with fear. Before I could respond, the figure took a step forward, slowly, deliberately. The fog around it seemed to grow thicker, swallowing the bridge in a haze. I felt trapped, stuck in place, as if the bridge itself had become a prison. "Go," the figure commanded again, its voice softer now but no less menacing. In that moment, every instinct screamed at me to run, but my feet wouldn't move. It was like the bridge had its grip on me, pulling me toward the figure, toward whatever dark force it represented. The air grew colder, and then I saw something that made my blood run cold. The figure wasn't alone anymore. From the shadows, other figures began to emerge, ghostly shapes, vague and indistinct at first, but slowly becoming clearer. I could see their faces now, pale, twisted, their eyes hollow and black as they stared at us from the dark. "Cross," the figure repeated, now right in front of us, its hand reaching out as though it were offering something, offering us a path into whatever nightmare lay beyond the bridge. I pulled myself together and grabbed my friend's arm. "We're leaving, now." With one last glance at the dark, shrouded figures, I turned and ran. We didn't stop until we were back on the main trail, gasping for air, our hearts pounding in our chests. But even then, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed us, that something had crossed the bridge with us. We didn't speak much on the walk back to the car, both of us too shaken to say anything. When we finally made it to the car and drove away, the forest seemed to swallow up the road behind us, the figures on the bridge vanishing into the shadows where they belonged. I haven't gone back to that forest, and I don't plan to. If you ever find yourself near a bridge under the full moon, especially one that glows in a way it shouldn't, I'd advise you to turn around. Because once you step onto the bridge under the full moon, you might not come back the same. You might not come back at all. And whatever you do, don't listen to the figures in the mist, because their whispers will lead you somewhere you don't want to go. The bridge doesn't just connect two places, it connects two worlds. And once you cross, there's no turning back. Some places have a way of haunting you, even long after you've left. I learned that firsthand when I crossed the broken Bridge of Echoes. It wasn't supposed to be a big deal. I was just out for a drive, looking for a new hiking spot, when I stumbled upon the bridge. It wasn't marked on any map, but it looked ancient. The kind of bridge you'd expect to see in old legends, with stonework so weathered it looked like it might crumble at any moment. But something about it caught my attention. The bridge was deep in the forest, far away from any real roads. The trees grew thick around it, their branches twisted, reaching for each other like they were holding secrets. The air felt heavy, almost damp, and there was an unsettling silence, the kind that presses against your ears and makes your heartbeat sound too loud. I wasn't afraid, not exactly, but I knew something wasn't right. As I parked my car and approached the bridge, I could feel it in my chest. The bridge called to me, but there was something eerie about that call, something that made me hesitate just a moment too long. The wooden planks were worn, the rails cracked and rusty. The creek beneath was sluggish, the water dark, as though it had lost its way. There was no sound from the creek, no chirping birds, no rustling leaves, just an oppressive, still silence that wrapped itself around the bridge like a thick blanket. I stepped onto the bridge. The moment I did, it felt like the world shifted. The air around me grew colder, and the wooden planks beneath my feet creaked like the bridge itself was alive. groaning under the weight of time. It wasn't just the sound of an old bridge settling underfoot. It was the sound of something that had been forgotten, something that hadn't been touched in years, but still remembered the weight of what had passed over it. I looked around, trying to shake off the discomfort, but the feeling only intensified. The trees seemed to loom closer, the shadows beneath them stretching long into the clearing, their shapes shifting in the corner of my eyes. That's when I heard it. A voice, faint but unmistakable. "Help!" I froze, my heart thudding in my chest. I wasn't sure if I had heard it or if it was my mind playing tricks. But then, just as I started to move again, I heard it clearer this time. "Help me?" It was a whisper, barely audible, but it felt real, coming from below. I looked over the edge of the bridge, and for a second I thought I saw something. Someone moving beneath the water. But when I blinked, the water was still again, its surface broken only by the faintest ripple. I stepped forward, my legs heavy, almost reluctant. But the bridge was old, the planks narrow, and the darkness beneath felt like it was calling me. As I walked toward the center, the whisper came again. "Please, help me." This time the voice was louder, more urgent. I couldn't ignore it, couldn't stop myself from looking over the edge once more. And that's when I saw them. Figures, shadows really, beneath the surface of the water. Their faces were twisted, blurred, but I could tell they were people. Men, women, their forms distorted by the dark water, their eyes wide with desperation. It was as though they were reaching up, their hands just below the surface, trying to grab hold of something or someone. And for the briefest moment, I could almost hear their breath, their gasps for air. I stumbled back, my mind racing, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, but now they weren't just words. It was like the bridge itself was speaking, the voices of the lost souls trapped beneath it, calling for help. The very wood of the bridge seemed to groan in sympathy, its old beams creaking with the weight of the past. I wanted to run. I should have turned around and never looked back, but I didn't. Something dark and powerful kept me there. The air was thick with the past, with memories of pain, of loss. It was like the bridge had swallowed those who had crossed it before, and now it wanted me too. "Help me." The voice again, this time right behind me. I spun around, but there was no one there. The ground beneath me trembled, and I could feel the bridge shifting, moving. The air grew colder, the mist curling in around me, and the figures in the water seemed to move. Closer, their hands stretching upward, just out of reach. Their eyes followed me, their faces contorted in agony. I was trapped. The bridge, the mist, the voices. It was all closing in. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could hear was the whispering, the desperate cries of the forgotten souls below. And then, everything stopped. The voices faded, the air cleared, and the bridge was silent once more. It was like nothing had happened. The water flowed beneath me, calm and still, the fog lifting from the ground. I stood there, frozen, unsure of what had just transpired. But one thing was certain. The bridge wasn't just a bridge. It was a place where the past had lingered, where lost souls had been trapped and their cries never stopped. It was a place where people like me were drawn in, like moths to a flame, only to become another whisper in the wind, another echo in the water. I didn't look back as I ran off the bridge, away from the creek, away from the mist, but I could still hear them, the whispers, the cries. They followed me, not in the air, not in the wind, but inside me. They had touched me, marked me in ways I couldn't understand. If you ever come across an old broken bridge in the woods, one that feels like it's watching you, one that calls you to cross, don't. Because once you step onto the bridge, you'll hear the echoes. You'll hear the whispers of the forgotten. And once you listen, there's no turning back. The Bridge of Echoes doesn't just trap the lost, it traps you. There are some places where the wind sounds like it's weeping, where the trees seem to lean in closer, whispering secrets. The crying bridge is one of those places, and once you hear its cries, you may never forget them. It all started with a casual drive out of town. I was looking for a quiet spot to think, away from the noise of life, so I decided to take a back road I had never driven before. I wasn't in a rush, just needed to clear my head. But the further I drove, the more I realized that I was getting lost. I passed a few farms, then an old house, and eventually the road narrowed until it was nothing but dirt and gravel. The woods around me thickened and I couldn't see much beyond the trees, their branches twisted and thick like a maze. Eventually I came upon a bridge. It wasn't much to look at, just a weathered wooden structure crossing a small creek, but something about it felt off. The air around the bridge seemed heavy, like something was waiting. The road seemed to fade into nothing past the bridge, and I realized that the way forward was the same as the way back. The first thing I noticed as I stepped onto the bridge was the sound. It wasn't the usual creak of old wood, though I could hear that too. It was a soft sound, almost like a distant sob. I stopped in my tracks thinking I had imagined it, but the sound came again. It was faint, like the wind was carrying it from far away, but unmistakable. It sounded like something was crying softly but insistently just on the other side of the bridge. I looked around, but there was no one there. No other cars, no people. The woods were quiet, still, except for the sound of the distant crying. My feet moved of their own accord, taking me further across the bridge. I was drawn to the sound, compelled to find its source even though I had no reason to. The closer I got to the middle of the bridge, the louder the crying became. It wasn't just a soft sob anymore. It was growing louder, more desperate, like someone was mourning, lost and alone. The sound seemed to echo, bouncing off the bridge itself, the water below barely moving, reflecting nothing but the gray sky above. As I reached the center of the bridge, I stopped again. The air felt colder, and the mist that had been swirling around the creek now clung to the bridge, thick and suffocating. The crying, no, it wasn't just crying anymore, turned into wailing, the kind of wailing you hear in nightmares. It wasn't the sound of a person. It was something much older, much darker. I looked over the edge of the bridge, my heart pounding, and that's when I saw it. The water wasn't reflecting the trees or the sky. It was reflecting something else. Faces. Dozens of faces, twisted in pain, distorted by the murky water. They weren't solid, but they were there, hovering just beneath the surface, staring up at me. Their eyes were wide, their mouths open, but they weren't speaking. They were crying, wailing, pleading. The wails from below intensified, the cries echoing in my ears, making my head spin. The water beneath the bridge began to churn, and I saw something move just beneath the surface. Something long, dark, and writhing. For a moment I thought it was the figure of a person, but then it moved again, twisting in a way that no human body could. I stepped back, my breath catching in my throat. I had to get off the bridge. I turned to run, but the moment I moved, the crying stopped. Everything went silent. The air grew still, and for a moment I thought it was over, like whatever force had been pulling me was gone. But then I heard it again. This time the crying wasn't coming from the creek. It was coming from behind me, from the other side of the bridge. A low, mournful wail. I turned quickly, my heart racing again, but I couldn't see anyone. There was nothing there, just the empty woods, the trees looming around me like silent watchers. The wailing came again, but this time it was right behind me, so close I could feel the breath on my neck. The sound seemed to be all around me, the trees, the bridge, the very air vibrating with it. It felt like the bridge was alive, like it was a thing with a memory, a thing that had seen so much pain that it carried it with it. I didn't wait for the next wail. I ran. I bolted off the bridge, my feet pounding the wooden planks, the cries following me, chasing me like they wanted me to stay. I didn't stop until I was far away, back on the dirt road, where the air felt lighter, the sound of the wailing fading behind me. When I looked back at the bridge from a distance, it seemed ordinary again. Just an old structure over a creek. The cries were gone, the wailing disappeared, and the bridge stood there silent and still, as if nothing had ever happened. But I know what I heard. I know what I felt. The bridge wasn't just a bridge. It was a place that held something. A memory, a grief, something that hadn't been laid to rest, something that had been left behind. The crying bridge isn't just haunted by a ghost. It's haunted by the cries of the lost, the forgotten, the souls who never found peace. And if you ever hear them, if you ever hear that wailing, don't listen. Don't stay. Because once the bridge calls to you, once you hear the cry, it won't let you go. And you'll never be the same again. Some roads are meant to be forgotten, lost to time. The Vanishing Bridge is one of those roads, a place that doesn't quite exist unless you're looking for it, unless you're meant to find it. It was a fall afternoon when I first came across it. The air was crisp, the kind of chilly that makes you wish you had a jacket but don't mind too much when you're moving. I was driving down an unfamiliar road, having taken a wrong turn on my way to a small town I'd never been to. I had no specific destination, just a need to get away from the noise, the routine, and to lose myself for a while. At first, the drive was peaceful enough. The trees were turning shades of gold and red, and the scenery was quiet, nothing more than rolling hills and farms dotting the landscape. I didn't even notice when the road began to narrow, the trees on either side growing thicker. It was only when the road turned sharply, and I saw a sign I didn't expect, that I realized I had gone too far. Vanishing Bridge, 2 miles ahead. Didn't know why, but something about that sign caught my attention. It was old, the paint peeling, but still legible. It didn't make sense. A bridge wasn't something you'd normally see on a road sign like that, at least not in the middle of nowhere. And the name, the Vanishing Bridge, it was a strange thing to see on a road sign, almost as if it didn't want to be found. Curiosity got the better of me, and I followed the sign, watching as the path seemed to shrink even further. The woods grew denser, the trees looming overhead, and the fog that had begun to form gave the entire place an almost dreamlike quality. The air felt heavier, like it was waiting for something, and then I saw it. A bridge, or at least what looked like a bridge. It wasn't grand or impressive, but it was there, arching over a creek that I could barely make out in the fog. The wood was old, rotting in places, and the iron railings were rusted with age. But the strangest thing? There was no road on the other side. It was as if the bridge led to nowhere. I stopped the car just before the entrance to the bridge, unsure of what I was seeing. I stepped out, the air so thick with fog that it felt like I was stepping into another world. The bridge stood there, empty, silent, waiting. There was something unsettling about it, but I didn't quite know why. I've never been a superstitious person, but in that moment I felt a shiver run through me. I walked toward it slowly, my feet crunching on the gravel, the only sound the distant rush of water. As I approached the bridge, I stopped. I could see it now. The fog wasn't just around the bridge. It was coming from beneath it, curling up and swallowing the surrounding trees and ground. It was like the bridge existed in a space outside of time. I don't know why I decided to cross. Maybe it was the silence, or maybe it was the pull of curiosity, but I stepped onto the bridge. As soon as my foot hit the first plank, the world seemed to shift. The fog thickened around me, and I felt the temperature drop, a chill running up my spine. The creek below was completely still now, no sound of water flowing, just an eerie quiet that seemed to close in on me. I made my way to the middle of the bridge when I felt it, a pull, as though something was tugging at my feet, making me stop in my tracks. I looked down, but the fog around me had grown so thick that I couldn't see anything below. The air was suffocating now, pressing against my chest, and I felt dizzy. Then I heard it. Footsteps. At first I thought it was my own, but they weren't. These footsteps were behind me, steady, deliberate. I turned around quickly, but there was no one there. The bridge was empty, just the thick fog swirling around me, the silence broken only by the sound of those footsteps. I felt a jolt of panic. My heart raced, and I could feel my pulse in my throat. I turned again, ready to run back, but that's when I saw it. The end of the bridge, where the path was supposed to lead, was gone. There was no road, no land, just more fog. The footsteps came again, this time louder, faster, as though they were getting closer. My legs felt heavy, my body frozen, as I realized the bridge wasn't just vanishing behind me, it was disappearing in front of me too. The space at the far end of the bridge had begun to blur, like the fog was erasing the world beyond it. I tried to turn back, but when I looked behind me, the way was gone. The bridge stretched on forever, but it was closing in around me. The fog seemed to grow darker, the footsteps growing louder, like something was chasing me, something I couldn't see. With a sudden burst of adrenaline, I ran. I didn't look back, just sprinted forward, my breath quick and sharp in the thick air. The fog clung to my skin like it was trying to pull me down, but I pushed through, my feet stumbling over the wooden planks. And then, just like that, I was out. I found myself back on the road, the bridge gone. The fog had lifted and the woods were quiet again. My heart was pounding in my chest, my legs shaking beneath me. But the bridge, the vanishing bridge, was no longer there. I don't know how long I stood there staring at the empty space where the bridge had been. I couldn't explain what happened, what I had seen, or what I had heard. I didn't even know how I had gotten off the bridge, but I knew one thing for certain. That bridge wasn't meant to be found. Now, I don't go near those woods. I don't go looking for bridges that aren't on any map. And I don't go down roads that feel like they're pulling me into a place I can't escape. If you find the vanishing bridge, my advice to you is simple. Don't cross it. Don't even stop. Because once you step onto it, you might find that it doesn't just disappear. It takes you with it, and you might never return. Thanks for staying with us until the very end. If you enjoyed tonight's chilling tales, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that keep you up at night. Share your favorite part in the comments. We're always watching, and remember, at Nocturnal Narrative Studio, the night never truly ends.